Namaste. Welcome to the October event of Indic Forum. Indic Forum is a non-profit based in California which promotes Indian history, culture, and dharma. Every month, we conduct an event where we bring individuals, authors, and researchers to present their work. Those who would like to donate can find a link on our website indicforum.org. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, where all events are streamed live. Please note that this event is being recorded. Our today's guest is Anil Mehta ji. He has a BTech from IIT Kharagpur and a MS in Chemical Engineering from the University of Texas. He has over 30 years of experience in research, development, and design in the chemical industry with 12 United States patents. He has been keenly interested in history since his childhood. After first encountering theories regarding the severe distortions in ancient Indian chronology and history, he could not wait to find the truth. He retired early in 2018 from a very satisfying career to commit his research skills full time to better understand and share the true history of India. Today, he is here with us to talk about his book, The History and Chronology of Ancient India. The current widely presented history and chronology of ancient India is not the one recorded by Indians, but rather a distorted version created during the colonial rule. This book explains the reasons and the glaring errors in the chronology and history of ancient India. Anilji approaches these errors with evidence based on years of extensive research supported by hundreds of references. He discusses numerous scientific specific examples of distortions to provide a correct, continuous, and connected chronology and history of India. The audience can ask questions in the chat. At the end of the talk, we will reserve some time for questions as well. Anilji, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Siddeshji, for the very generous introduction. And thank you, Siddeshji, Nehaji, and the entire Indic Forum for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share the essence of my book with you. So I really appreciate that. So going to the topic now, obviously this is about the history of India, but the two words now I want you to make a note of it. One is the ancient India. So my work starts from very ancient times, 3000 plus BC, and ends at 1192 AD. So that's what I define as ancient India. Other part is chronology. The chronology means the timeline, and the focus of this book is on getting the correct timeline of India's history, ancient India's history. The chronology problem is with the ancient Indian history, not after the 1200 AD. So that's why the focus of the book is on the ancient Indian history. So going to the next slide means give you a little bit idea about what this presentation is going to cover. So why this book, and I think to some extent Siddeshji covered that. Talk a little bit about the Panchanga and calendars of ancient India, and then I'll go in some detail about the distortion, how it was done, why it was done, and when it was done. Our Puranas have extensive record of Vansavalis, the genealogy is what we call in English. So I'll touch on that. Mahabharata war, I'll talk about that. Briefly, Gautam Buddha's date and Adi Shankaracharya's date, and touch upon Vikramaditya and Shalivana, if heard of those kings, some of the greatest kings of ancient India, and a glance at the book's contents. On why this book, Siddeshji, you gave a fairly good introduction, which covered the first point, that the history that we are being taught all over the world, including India, is the one written during the colonial time period. Okay. So in essence, what has been done is that 1500 plus years of India's history has been shrunk to about 2600 years. Sri Ram and Sri Krishna have been turned from historical figures to mythological figures, Kalpanik. There is evidence available to prove their historicity, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Bhagavad Gita's age has been cut from 5100 years to 2100 years. Means if you look at on the internet, you will see first century BC, which is essentially about 2100 years before now. These distortions remain even after 77 years of India's independence. And the problem is that very few people are aware of these distortions. Maybe 100 or 1,000 people know of this. So that's why we need to really make people aware of this. I've dedicated this book to Mother India and truth in history. And in this process, I recorded several calendars in this book, and we'll talk about some of them later on. But so this is the current year of Kali Yuga 5126. Kali Yuga is not a myth, but it's a calendar which has been around for thousands of years. To be precise, this is the 5126th year of the Kali Yuga. There's another calendar which is almost as ancient. It is called Saptarshi Samvat. It's also called Kashmirabda, or it's also called Laukikabda, and its current year is 5100. Kashmirians know about this, though of course now fewer Kashmirians know about this, but if you go back 100 years, many more people knew about it. It was a very popular calendar in Kashmir. There are the other two calendars now, Vikram Samvat and Shalivahansaka. And besides the Christian calendar AD 2024, which is the current year, this Vikram Samvat and Shalivahansaka, these are actually currently widely used calendars in India, currently used. Vikram Samvat is mostly in northern India, but north of the Vindhyas, and the Shalivahansaka is typically the south of the Vindhyas. So Vikram Samvat, there are two kinds of calendars. They are just 7 months apart. The one is the starting from Chaitra Sud 1, just like Kali Yuga and Saptarshi, they all start from Chaitra Sud 1. And so these calendars, so Vikram Samvat is 2081, that's the same calendar used in Nepal also, it's Nepal's official calendar. And then Vikram Samvat 7 months later starts in Gujarat, so that's why the current year is 2080, and right after Diwali it will become 2081. And then Shalivahansaka, so which is 135 years after the Vikram Samvat, current year is 1946, and this is India's national calendar. Not many people know about this, even I didn't know about this until my research. But this calendar is used in India's, Government of India's official communications, along with the Christian calendar. So now here is why, here is some proof of those who can, I apologize to those who can't read Devanagari, but this calendar is cover pages in Devanagari. And so here you can, I have highlighted three samvats or shakas. Shaka, samvat mean the same thing. Okay, samvat comes from samvatsara. So we have Shalivahansaka 1915. So this calendar, this panchang is from 93-94. So 31 years old panchang. So that's why this 1915, and if you add up 31 years, 1946. Vikram Samvat, same thing, 2049, 2050, you add up 31 years, current year is 2080, 81. And here is, in small letters, Kali Yuga Shake, 5095. And you add 31 years there, and it's 5126. So Kali Yuga started in 3102 BC. But I would rather say that the Christian year started in the Kali Yuga year 3102, because Kali Yuga existed, whereas Christian year did not exist until that time. So that would be a more correct portrayal. So there are many calendars that have been there in India due to its long history and a large size. And this Panchang I was able to obtain from my friend Pushpak Pandya is no longer around, been less than a year since he passed away. Just make sure everybody's on board with some terms. I think most people know this. One is chronology, so we are talking about the timeline, whether Shankaracharya was born in 800 AD or 2500 BC. So that's a timeline. Now the BC is before Christ, so before the birth of Christ. And AD it's a short for the Roman Anno Domini, which is the year, means the year of the Lord. So again, it's starting from the Christ's year. There is no precise date when Jesus Christ was born, but anyway, so it's been accepted as a certain given year, and that's what we follow. Here are some of the main calendars of ancient India, and I've only included those calendars which have been used in the book, in the various chapters and discussion. So the oldest calendar actually on this is Yudhishthira Shaka, which started in 3138 BC with the coronation of Yudhishthir after the Mahabharata war. And this calendar, you will see that, as we will see later, in the Dwarka Mutt, where the Shankaracharya Parampara has been recorded, they used to use those first 500 years of Parampara have been recorded in Yudhishthira Shaka, and then afterward they switched to the Vikram Samvat. Okay, so once the Vikram Samvat started, the Yudhishthira Shaka went out of use. Okay, then 36 years after that, the Kali Yuga Shaka started, and this is when Sri Krishna passed away. That's when the Kali Yuga calendar started. And 26 years later, this is the Saptarshi Shaka, which I mentioned, the Kashmir Abda, the calendar popular in Kashmir. So that started, and that is said to have started when it's actually a subset of a calendar that had been in use before. The Saptarshi calendar has been used before also, but a new cycle started when Yudhishthira basically left the world for heaven. Now, for whatever reason, the Yudhishthira Shaka that Jains follow starts from a few hundred years later. And then if we go to the now a long gap in between, there are many other calendars as well, Buddha calendar, Jain calendar, so many, but I haven't touched upon them. Malav Ganashaka. So this was the calendar. It started in ancient Malwa or current day Madhya Pradesh. So for the Malwa people, so Malav Ganashaka, that started in 725 BC, and that has been used and been discussed in the book. Shakan Rupa Kala, so this is actually a Persian calendar. Shaka, the kings there called Shaka. And so the Shaka word has two meanings. One is Shaka means calendar, and Shaka also refers to the people, west of India, so such as Persian. Then Sri Harsha Samvat, there was the emperor called Sri Harsha Vikramaditya, and so he started the calendar in 457 BC. And then Gupta Yuga, everybody has heard of Gupta dynasty. And so that calendar started in 327 BC. And then of course after that we have talked about, I have mentioned the Vikramaditya and Shali Vansaka. So Vikram Samvat started in 57 BC and Shali Vansaka started in 79 AD. So now we come to the gist of the book. This chart graphically represents how the true timeline, so on the left hand side you see the true chronology, and on the right hand side you see the false or the distorted chronology. So the Mahabharata war, initially it wasn't denied, but over time, as the work on the rewriting of the history continued, the Mahabharata war got declared as mythical. Okay. Even though colonials knew of the Kali Yuga era and they have extensively used that, but later on they started denying that as well. That India, they said that Indians did not have any system of tracking time. Okay. So the Vedas were Vedas were compiled. What it means is that they were already there, but Ved Vyasa compiled the Vedas into four separate granthas, and so that compilation happened before 3100 years. And in the distorted history, what we are told is that Vedas were written somewhere around 1000 to 500 BC time period. Okay, and then Gautam Buddha, who lived in 1800 BC, so 3800 years ago. Currently, we are taught all over the world that he lived around 500 BC, 2500 years ago. Chandragupta Maurya and Ashoka, I will talk about that. These kings lived in 1500 BC, but we are told about that they lived in 300 BC, and I'll talk about this in great detail, but this was the foundation of the distorted history. Adi Shankaracharya lived in 500 BC, and we are told lived in 800 AD. So you can see, so many have been shifted down by about 1300 years, and there is a reason for that. Somewhere between 1200 to 1400 years, where all these have been shifted down, except Chandragupta or the Gupta, so Gupta dynasty, Varamira, all that they got shifted out by about 600 years or 700 years. So I'm not the first one to get into this subject. So many giants have worked on this before, and because of them, my work, I've been able to do my work. And some of the very noteworthy names and these four giants on whose shoulders I'm sitting, they have been extensively referenced and quoted in my book. T.S. Narayan Sastri, he published a book, The Age of Shankara, in 1916. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 50. He had plans to publish much more, but he passed away, unfortunately. His friend, M. Krishnamacharya, he published a volume called History of Classical Sanskrit Literature in 1937, again giving us a similar chronology. And then in 1950s, Pandit Kota Venkatachalam, he devoted his entire life to history. So about 4 decades of his life, he would devote it to restoring the true chronology of ancient India. He published 9 books in English, many more in Telugu. He also gave a presentation at the All India Conference on History in Ahmedabad in 1953. But his work was ignored. Then, 30 years later, K.D. Setna, he wrote a book, published a book called Ancient India in a New Light in 1989. Unfortunately, this book is not referenced in any single place or book that I know of. I had to make a great search for this book, and I had to locate this book 150 miles away from where I live. So my current book is a synthesis of the great work of these 4 people and plus many others who have published, various papers and books subsequently. And then I added some refinement to this and integrated this work into one chronology that hopefully fixes a few errors from the previous work. So now let's get into when, why, and how we ended up with this distorted history. Some of you may know that Bengal fell to the British East India Company in 1757. Just to give you a picture of India at that time, much of India was still being controlled by Maratha. Maratha Empire was the largest empire, controlled about 2/3 of the India at that time. So it was at its peak actually in 1757. However, then later on in 1784, and Maratha Empire still is existing, but Bengal is firmly under British rule and some of the eastern India and southern India. So Asiatic Society was founded in 1784 by William Jones, under the patronage of Warren Hastings of the East India Company. Warren Hastings was Governor General of the East India Company in Calcutta, Calcutta being the headquarters of the British East India Company at that time. So, in Asiatic society, only Europeans were allowed as members of the society until 1829. Now, beginning in 1784, when William Jones founded the society, he dismissed the high antiquity of India's history. He learned from the Pandits in Bengal about our 3100 plus years of chronology and history, and he dismissed it from the very beginning. He staunchly believed in the Christian version of the world history, that is, the world started with Adam in 4006 BC. And there were floods, and we'll talk about this also. I'll show you the proof of this. He believed the Greek chronology, which starts in 600 BC, to be the oldest in the world. And so he couldn't accept Indian chronology, which went to 3100 plus BC. And then he started playing with India's chronology to bring it in line as he thought it should be. So here is a table that William Jones prepared, or I converted this into table, but this is, you can see this, I given a reference for this. It's from Asiatic Researches, published in 1799, about 225 years ago. So this is the chronology that he understood that our Puranas contained. So there is, in 3100 BC, there's a Brihadarashtra dynasty, then 1000 years later, there's a Pradyut dynasty, then there's a Shishunag dynasty, which lasted for 360 years. There's Nanda dynasty for 100 years. There's a Maurya dynasty. Now, started in 1500 BC, and then Sunga, Kanva, Andhra, and then the last king of the Andhra dynasty. And after that, Gupta dynasty comes, but apparently he didn't know that it hasn't been mentioned in this work. So this is what he started with. This is mostly true, except that in the Maurya, Sunga, and Kanva dynasty reign periods, there are significant errors. So we'll talk about that later. So starting from the chronology, which started in 3100 BC, he started playing with it and he brought it down to about 2000 BC. So now note here, he mentions Abhimanyu, son of Arjun. Okay, so we have been conditioned to think of Mahabharata as a myth, but here you can see the colonial historians at that time in the beginning are acknowledging Mahabharata as a historical event, and that's why they mention this. Then there's Pradyut dynasty, so 1000 years of Brihadarashtra dynasty, and then Buddha he now places in 1000 BC. Okay, note that currently we are taught 563 BC for Buddha's birth, but at that time 1000 BC, then Nanda and so on. So he started playing with this chronology. Mentions, see the Vikramaditya in 56 BC. So again, now currently Vikramaditya doesn't exist in any history books, but he existed until that time. Okay. So now if you take a look at this, this is the chronological table, again from the same paper that I mentioned over here. You can see, so in the left hand column there's Adam, Noah, Deluge, etc. Christian and Muslim. Hindu, Manu, and then Hiranyakashipu, and then Rama and Pradyut, Buddha, etc. And the last column, years from 1788 of our era. So when you see 5794, that is 5794 years before 1788, so which translates into 4006 BC. So he puts Adam in 4006 BC, starting of the world, and then Noah, okay, about maybe 1000 years later, and then there is deluge in 2350 BC. So according to him, World was wiped out in 2350 BC because of the delusion. People had to be repopulated, world had to be repopulated, and none of our dynasties could have existed, before that time. So you see how this, what is the basis of the history that we have ended up with. Now there's another key point to be noted here, and this is the basis of the rewritten history. Sandra Cortes. I had never heard of his name before I started doing my research. Who's Sandra Cortes? Sandra Cortes is the Indian king described by ancient Greek writers who followed Alexander, and so the king was supposed to be a contemporary of Alexander. So William Jones proposed the idea that this Sandra Cortes is none but Chandragupta Maurya. Now, I showed you that you already had seen the chronology, Chandragupta Maurya dynasty in 1500 BC. But anyway, he proposed that Sandra Cortes was Chandragupta Maurya, and this essentially then later on became the foundation of the chronology that we have. The mistake that he made is that actually it was Chandragupta of the Gupta dynasty who was the contemporary of Alexander, Chandragupta Gupta of 326 BC, whereas Chandragupta Maurya and Chanakya, they both existed in 1500 BC, so 1200 years earlier. And so by bringing Chandragupta Maurya to 326 BC or 300 BC, essentially erased, shortened 1200 years of our history. And then everything else in India's chronology was dated in relation to this new date of Chandragupta Maurya. So, for example, Gautam Buddha about 300 years before Chandragupta Maurya. And then everybody else, Ashoka. And then similarly, the Kashmir and Nepal history also were redated accordingly. So you see, this is how 1200 years of our history were just taken out because of misidentification. And then after that, what happened is, we'll talk about Puranas. We have been conditioned to think that Puranas are nothing but just, just fables and just mythological stories to make some points. Each of the Purana, and there are 5 major Puranas, we'll talk about that later on, but they contain chronological information. And so because of this the new basis of history, nothing recorded in the Puranas matched this new basis. And so then the colonial historians proceeded to edit the Puranas to justify their conjectures. Here is one example of the tampering of the Purana. Now, for those who can read Devanagari, so here is the verse. The Saptashashtada Pramshu Pradiptena Agnina Samaha Sapta Vinsati Bhavyanam Andhanam tu Yadda Punaha. So, we'll not try to understand what this verse says, but it is describing a cycle, the Saptarshi, and the Saptarshi somewhat, by the way, is based on the Saptarshi that we see in the sky. So it's on that, the constellation is not the right word, but anyway, that's what comes to my mind right now. So that cycle repeats every 2700 years, and so that's what is being referred to here, Pranshu Pradiptena, meaning shining bright. So this word was taken, so which is on the original verse, and then you can see this altered verse by Parjaiter. He published a book, Puranas, the Puranic dynasties of the Kali age, and so all the references are given, and so anyone can check it out. So he altered the verse to mean Prahuhu Pratipena. Now who is this Pratipe? Pratipa is the father of Shantanu. So by changing Pradipte to Pratipe, he essentially tried to add 4 more generations into the same period of chronology. Okay, So in essence, attempting to shorten the chronology. I will not go into great detail, but this is an example of how they used the Puranas and then tempered them to fit to their story. Fortunately, we have, at least one Purana has a correct verse, whereas the Vayu Purana is currently carrying the altered verse. So, since I mentioned the Puranas, so wonder, how do we know our true history? And these are the Puranas are the primary source of our true history and chronology. If there's a section in Puranas, typically at the end of the Puranas, it could be a third or fourth, depending on what Purana it is. But there are 5 major Puranas that contain the chronological information: Matsya, Vishnu, Vayu, Brahmanda, and Bhagavata. And there's also Bhavishya Purana, which contain the later part of the history, the Agni Vamsha. I will talk about that a bit later on. So the colonial Indologists, they used Puranas and they used the list of the kings and the dynasties given in the Puranas, but they cherry picked. They changed the chronological information and discarded some dynasties and some kings to fit into the shortened time period. Arbitrarily, all these changes were done. We also have 2 additional sources or 3 additional sources. Kali Yuga Raj Vrittanta, this is a text completely gone now, nowhere to be found. But this actually contained a very precise chronological information, year-wise, which king, even the details of the king, which king reigned for how long, as for the 3000 years of starting from 3100 BC to about the end of the period. Then we have another document, and that currently exists, Raj Tarangini. This is the history of the king of Kashmir and starts from well before 3000 BC to about 1148 AD. And this is available. There's another source called Nepal Raj Vamshavali. So Vamshavali again means genealogy, and the Raj Vamshavali, genealogy of the kings. And so that also exists. And there are many other sources as well, travelers and astronomical positions and so many inscriptions, whatnot. Can't go into much detail beyond this. So I want to give you some idea. This is from Appendix 1 of my book. This is the genealogy or Vamshavali of Chandra dynasty. This, and I given complete source of this, the Vishnu Purana and Bhagavad Purana, compared both of them. Now, what I want to highlight over here is a few things. You see Yadu. So Yadu, Sri Krishna is a descendant of this Yadu, 50 generations later. And in India we have Yadav, right? So Yadav is nothing but derived from Sanskrit. Those descendants of Yadu are called Yadav. Descendants of Raghu are called Raghav. Descendants of Kuru are called Kauravas. So on. So we have Yadu and then Puru, and so all the subsequent kings are the descendants of Puru. And the Puranas also describe the descendants of all these other kings as well at that time. Okay. Now, in this Puru descendants, we have Dushyanta, and Shakuntala. So based on this, Dushyanta Shakuntala is, based on this. Then their son Bharata, based on whom the Bharata name came, Bharata Varsha. Then his descendant Hasti. He founded Hastinapura. Hastinapura exists even now by its name. Then his descendant Kuru. And from Kuru descended Arjuna, etc. And then we'll go to the next page. Now from Kuru, we go further down. Then Kuru had 4 sons, and we have 2 branches from here. So one is from Kuru, we end up with Dhritarashtra and Pandu and Shantanu and all this. Okay. On the other side, we have Chedi. Chedi is the present Bundelkhand or the Gwalior region, I would say. And then, so Chedi kings in the beginning, and then from here, Magadha dynasty starts now, Bruhadratha. So this is, he is the first king of Magadha, as mentioned in your Puranas. And from there, we end up with Jarasandha and Magadha dynasty going down here. So you can see all these, none of these are imaginary names, you know. How many, it would have been a great, uh, amazing to imagine all these names. So let's talk about the Mahabharata war. Why? Because it's a pivotal event. The full record of India's chronology begins from the Mahabharata war. And Mahabharata war is vouched by three independent literature sources. So one I mentioned is the Puranas. We have at least 5 Puranas and other Puranas. There are total 18 Puranas actually. Then Raj Tarangini also mentions Mahabharata war and talks about it. Nepal Rajvanshavali also mentions Mahabharata war. And there are scores of books on dating of the Mahabharata war. There are also recent works which date Mahabharata war based on astronomical positions described in the Mahabharata, and there are a variety of evidence. So here are a couple of evidences. There's a inscription called Aihole inscription. Let's see how are you doing time-wise. So okay, I think I need to speed up a little bit here. So this inscription is in Karnataka. Then here is a map of, this is Google map of Girivraja, which is a present place in Rajgir. So that's, the 5 mountains are described in Mahabharata and which you can see exist. So that is the accuracy there. Here are the major archaeological sites, and some of them date back to 6500 BC, Rakhigarh is 6000 BC. So everybody who knows only about Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, but there are so many other archaeological sites in India. Talk about the ancient Saraswati River, which dried up in about 1900 BC. This was a huge river. So if you can see on the map, and this map is from a Dholavira archaeological site in Gujarat, Kutch. So Saraswati River flowed parallel to the Sindhu River, Indus River, and if you see that majority of the archaeological sites, vast majority are actually on the Saraswati River and not Sindhu. So that's why we call it Saraswati Sindhu civilization. Here are a couple of pictures. This is a tidal lock gate in Lothal, Gujarat, dated to 2800 BC. So you can imagine the shapes, the state of engineering at that time in 2800 BC. So now as we have the lock gate systems currently in many places like in Panama Canal, there are lock gate systems and even in Great Lakes. So here is a lock gate system essentially. Then in Dholavira, Kutch, there's a water harvesting system, again 3000 BC. Now, we are told that the script is not deciphered, Indus script is not deciphered, which is not true. A lot of work has been done, and so here is just some of that work and comparison of the Harappan script with the Brahmi script. It is mind-boggling how similar they are. So one can easily say that the Brahmi script is representing a continuation of the Indus script or the Harappan script, and so this is a sample of the Brahmi script from an inscription in Sarnath. So now you see this gets interesting. Since Chandragupta Maurya was taken as contemporary of Alexander, he got dated to 300 BC. But he is actually from 1500 BC, and Ashoka, his grandson, is 1400 BC. So if you are going to date his inscriptions, they should be dated to 1400 BC. So the Brahmi script actually is 1400 years BC, 1400 BC. So, and then you have only 1500 years gap left between the Indus script and the Brahmi script. So then the false dating of the script has been used in turn to date other scripts falsely. There is a momentous evidence, and this is from the Indica, and Indica doesn't exist right now, but fragments of Indica exist, and that is, an Indica was written by Megasthenes, who was a Greek ambassador uh, to the Gupta empires now, the Gupta emperors right now, not Maurya emperors. So he mentions that from the day of Father Bacchus, or this probably we think, or some people say that, some historians say that Bacchus refers to Shiva, but we don't know for sure. Whoever it is, from that person to Alexander the Great, their kings are reckoned at 154, means there were 154 kings until now, and their reigns total 6,451 years and 3 months. Okay. So, this statement was made in 326 BC. Alexander at that time, when invaded India in 326 BC. So you add up 326 BC to 6451, you end up with 6777 BC. And you will see that number also mentioned in my book, and we come to that number from another way also. So again, you got the reference there. I mentioned about Gautam Buddha, so I won't go much. So Gautam Buddha lived actually in 3800 BC, 3800 years ago instead of 2500 years ago. And chapter 8 explains all of that completely. Adi Shankaracharya, one thing I would like to mention, that the three mathas in India, the Dwarka Math, Jagannath Puri Math, and Kachi Kamkoti Math, have Acharya Parampara, or the record of 2500 years of Acharya Parampara with dates. So it establishes that's just one of the many evidence that Shankaracharya lived in 500 BC, and I'll just save the other details for later. When I talk about Vikramaditya and Shalivahana, so as I mentioned, the founders of the two popular calendars of India. So Vikramaditya lived in 1st century BC. He was one of the greatest emperors of India. In fact, in the legend, is considered as next only to Sri Ram and Sri Krishna. That's how great he was. He lived for a long time, and he also reigned for a long time. And so his calendar still survives, and he is corroborated by the Nepal Rajvanshawali and Raj Tarangini. Kalidas and Varamihira, they were the Navratnas, some of the Navratnas in his court, and both of these have been dated to 500 and 600. Then Shalivan and Vikramaditya has been simply erased from history. They don't exist in any textbooks. So if you want, this is my 5,000 years of India's history in one chart, if you want to say that. Just very quick overview. Hastinapur dynasty, Kosala dynasty, Magadha dynasties, and Kashmir, and then starting from here, the Vikramaditya and Shalivahana, those dynasties followed much later. Just to give you some idea of the contents of the book. So chapter 1, introduction. Chapter 2 is when, why, and how the false history was written. Also talks about the tempering of the Puranas and some examples there. I mentioned about the sources of Indian history, so that's chapter 3. Chapter 4, the calendars, a lot of information on the calendars, even some astronomical positions and all that described by many astronomers, the present astronomers as well. Chapter 5 on Hastinapur Empire. Chapter 6, historicity of Sri Krishna. There his genealogy also is given. And then the full description of not full, it has to be kept within limits, or all the Magadha dynasties lasted for about 3,000 years. On Gautam Buddha, then next chapter 9 on Adi Shankara, and then here Ujjain and Vikramaditya and Shalivahana and the rest of the dynasties of Agnivamshas there, Pramara Chauhan dynasty, Parihara dynasties, Pratihara dynasty, etc. Chapter 11 on the kings of Kashmir, all the way from 3000 plus BC to 1148. Kings of Nepal, all the way from before the Mahabharata war to about 800 or 1000 AD. Chapter 13, a small chapter on Patanjali, Mahavir Swami Varamira. Chapter 14 on inscriptions and archaeological evidence. Chapter 15 on fallacy of the Aryan invasion of India. And then chapter 16 on summary and conclusions. Let me just mention briefly here. So as you can, once the chronology was shortened from 3100 BC to 600 BC, okay, then that left a big room in between. And then because of the extreme similarity found between Sanskrit and European languages, William Jones initially, so and this chapter has that, that this must have come from some common source. And that was the seed of the theory of Aryan invasion of India. And they put Aryan invasion of India in 1500 BC. As you can see, we have chronology going back to 3100 BC. So what's next? Basically, so I hope I made some sense to you. And of course, you'll have to read the book for more details. But I would like to spread this awareness to everyone. The real concern is that it's been 77 years since independence of India, and still the same history is being taught all over the world, including India. And so I'd recommend each of you to recommend this book to your local libraries. I also will be seeking presentation opportunities at any place, including the universities. Universities is where this history is taught, and that's where it has to change ultimately. Universities and schools. And currently this book is available at an introductory price of $30 instead of $35, and plus tax, of course. And with that, I would, so okay, not bad, 48. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Anilji. That was a really impressive work. Uh, I would like participants to ask any questions. You can unmute yourself and ask, or you can put it on chat.
Um, good evening or good morning. It's Mohan Jain from Chicago.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm not a history student. I'm basically engineer, but I'm interested in subject. And so I got in the 1982 a book, South Asian Civilization Historical Atlas by University of Chicago. They published. And that goes all the way to Stone Age. And was published in 1978, and I got a copy. And the two authors, contributors were Professor Shiva Bajpayee from a historical point of view, and then Professor Mathur from geographical. So they went to India and had a lot of material from 17th centuries, which nuns brought it from India, and they brought it to the University of Minnesota, and from there the work started, and then finally it ended in the University of Chicago, and where Professor Schwarzberg was the one who was the chief editor, and so I'm not sure if you are aware of that, and maybe it will be interesting to look at it, see how much errors. It is being updated by Oxford right now, so it may be interesting to see what they missed or what they covered. That's all. And are you aware of that one? That's all. Thank you.
I'm not exactly aware of their work, but so now thank you for bringing this to my attention. I would be interested in taking a look at that.
Yeah, I will
Especially,
be happy to. I have a copy here, but I'm right now in Chicago, and now I know it is probably Oxford is you can buy from there or somewhere it should be available in library. I'm not
It,
sure in India. Mm.
it would be interesting because this to me this distorted chronology has become so institutionalized, and that's why it's going to be a big challenge. But so, and coming from Oxford or any Western institution, uh, I I don't see right now they accepting anything. I mean, if that work, if they got some manuscripts or whatever, I don't know what was obtained from 1700s, but I would imagine that those if anything published, recently, at least from Western media, would be except leave a few exceptions, would be retreating essentially what we are being taught currently.
I can show you too here. Let's see if I can show you. I'm not sure from here. Uh, is it possible to see it?
I'm not able to see it right now because let's
Mm.
see.
If they will allow. My video is on. Right? I don't know whether it's available. Uh, uh,
I think you are on blur, so maybe that's why it's probably going to ignore. Uh,
okay.
yeah.
Mm. All right. Anyhow, I will be happy to give anything more you need it. And I met Professor Shiva Vajpayee that time, and this whole South Asian civilization, and there are a lot of references they have on that one, and they go up in this particular edition. They go up to 1975, but I'm sure the newer edition will give information of the current India post independence.
Mhm.
But for your interest, this should be okay. That to look into that.
Definitely, I will be. Yeah, I'll be interested in
Yeah,
looking at that.
and also I don't know if you have seen the book on India's struggle for independence, published by NCRT in India, 1985.
So my focus has been mainly on the chronology, and
Mm-hmm.
so as you can see, my book, my work stopped at 1192 because we have the chronology problems until that time period, and after that we don't have chronological problems. So I needed to stay very focused, on
Okay.
the subject.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Please look at it and see if you find anything interesting or anything which fills the holes. You know, so they have all the artifacts. They brought it from different periods and from Stone Age onwards. You know.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Raghuji, you can ask now.
I think
Raghuji,
you're on mute.
yeah, yeah, Umeshji.
Thank you. I'm interested in two. I have two questions. Firstly, I'm interested in how the story of Krishna evolved into mythology, and whether part of his story is an immaculate birth, as that of Christ. And the second question relates to the Aryan invasion, because Adolf Hitler was so convinced that the Aryan race existed in the East that he sent one of his generals to go and investigate this. And the whole Holocaust was based on Hitler's belief of this Aryan, this superior Aryan race, which he believed he was part of, and hence the execution of his plan to exterminate the Jews during the Second World War. Thank you.
So, yes, it is true. The Aryan invasion theory came in the process of this distorted chronology. If this chronology had not been distorted, uh, then it might not have come, the Aryan invasion theory. Aryan invasion theory, as I explained in my chapter, the seed was born, the seed came from the similarity seen between Sanskrit and Indian languages, I mean European languages. And so then, and this was noticed by William Jones. He knew several languages, and the later on, this idea was then crystallized. This chronology was crystallized by Max Muller, and the Aryan invasion theory also was then, formulated by him, based on the similarity of Sanskrit and Indian European languages, that they must have come from some common source. And you have to keep in mind that all this was framed under the 4,000-year old world. Okay, at that time, that was the European mindset. In the 18th and 19th centuries, everything had to fit in that 4,000 years old world only. And that's how we ended up with this Aryan invasion theory and the distorted chronology.
My first question related to the how Krishna's story went from reality to mythology, and whether there was immaculate birth was part of the question, part
Oh,
of
okay,
his.
yeah. So yeah, I missed that, and so that over time, things do get added, and so that's probably the case now. So when I say that Krishna and Rama are historical people, that doesn't mean that everything written about them is all correct. There could be some exaggeration. But the as it is said that don't throw the baby with the bathwater. Okay, so you still have to, I mean, not necessarily discard the historicity of Sri Krishna and Sri Rama, even if some myths have been added to their stories.
Thank
Thank you.
Raghuji, you can ask now.
you, Raghu. Can't-
Raghuji, you are not audible.
Okay.
Can you check?
This is Mohan Jain again. You mentioned that you have some chapter on Lord Mahavir, Bhagwan Mahavir, in Jainism.
Yeah,
Bhagwan Mahavir was the 24th Tirthankar.
correct.
And how about the Bhagwan Rishabdev, the first Tirthankar, and who was also born in Ayodhya along with four other Tirthankars? Do you go in the detail of that? Because it's a very ancient religion, and I don't know how far you go on that one.
So yeah, I will answer a question there. So I have not gone all the way back, but I've gone up to the 22nd Tirthankar. So Bhagwan Mahavir, as you said, 24th Tirthankar, and then 23rd Tirthankar, I think, was Parshvanath, it's 788 BC, I think. And
Yeah.
then Neminath, 22nd Tirthankar, is believed to be Sri Krishna's contemporary. So that would
Yes.
put him in that would put him in 3100 BC. And that really, I mean, like I'm just amazed. So if 22nd Tirthankar is in 3100 BC,
Yeah.
then how old must be the first Tirthankar?
Yes. That's what you have to find out. But we believe probably at least 10,000 years, maybe
Could
more.
be. It's possible. And I don't have much information, so I would appreciate getting some information on that.
Yeah. So there are books on the history of Jainism. If you want to look into that, Jain sadhus have written, monks have written. I know. I think there is one book in 4 volumes. I think what is the author is. I think I'm not remember the name yet, but I can share with you. So they have 4 volumes from there. That goes quite back, starting from the beginning, history of Jain religion.
That would
And
be
there,
very interesting.
and there have been so many big saints who've written so many books and everything. There's a lot of history in that part, which covers other history also, because when they're writing from that period, they are describing some of the things happening at that time. You know.
And that would be very helpful too, because in history we have to connect things with you know each
Yeah.
other, and which I have done, at least I attempted to do, when I give the chronology here. It also
Yeah.
has to match up with what's described elsewhere.
Mr. Mehta, Dr. Mehta, I want to just add a value for your topic about more details about Jainism. Kannada, which is a language of Karnataka, has had numerous, not one or two, it's a highly established Jainism empire, including the kings converting to Jainism. And the first Kannada poet called Adi Kavi was called Pampa. He, starting from him, for example, all the poets have written. First, their duty was to write about the one Tirthankara they can pick and the history, etc. And later, after that, they were free to write major epic poetry. It's not little, epic poetry. And there is one of the first one is called Vikramarjuna Vijaya, where he portrays the Jain king. Under him, the series of Jain poets were there. He writes Mahabharata, but with the Jainism angle. And I can get you references. Professors in Karnataka state will be there. There are lots of places. If you're interested in Jainism, you can go there. You see a lot of relics. Even the Gomateshwara, the big statue, is in Karnataka.
Yeah, I've seen the huge statue of Bahubali, uh,
Yes,
and the Hampi, and
correct.
yeah,
Correct. And
Shravanabelagola.
I, as a student of Kannada, I studied most of the rituals and how the monks became monks and what were the regiment they followed on themselves, and the poets, the Asthana poets, were all Jains. They wrote about Jains. One Tirthakara they have to write about, one epic first, and that as a duty, as their Jainism duty, and then they write, but again with the Jainism angle, spreading Jainism. It was there for 500 years in Karnataka,
I see.
starting from the first poet. We all should be proud of all of that. And I have studied quite a lot because as a student, I studied all of that. Myself, our professors knew everything. And another place you can go to is the Kannada Sahitya Academy. They will have all the information.
I see. I see.
And I have led a series of 15 conferences on different genres of Kannada literature with what we call as Diggajas. These are the biggest, poets and so on, and other literators. And this was one of the topics. We kept one for Jain literature only, of all kinds. So anything you need, you should be able to look for me in even in LinkedIn, Dr. K.R.S. Murthy. I'll be glad to do. And I have myself spoken. So, yeah.
Wonderful. I appreciate it. This would be, yeah. So there is this is going to open up a lot of avenues for me now. So
Exactly,
perfect.
exactly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for very useful information.
Yeah.
Raghuji, if you can speak now, can you check your mic? Raghuji, can you hear me? If anybody else has any questions, please ask.
Well, I can go back to the book that we put to investigate the Aryan existence. From the text I read, it said that when the general came back and reported to Hitler that he couldn't find any evidence of Aryan existence. So that proves that's in accordance with your chapter of it being false. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I mean, I could pick up a few words, but couldn't really get the question.
Okay, I said
No,
no.
let me add a little bit
Okay.
on the topic of Jainism. You probably know the BSS group, Boja Swami Narayan Swaminarayan Samstha. They did a very big event, the first event international in New Jersey in Edison, and I was honored by them. But my luck was among Swaminarayan group chief, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Chinmayananda, Dayananda Saraswati, they all passed away. And Sushil Kumar Muni ji, who was the chief of all Jain religion at that time, he also passed away. I was lucky to be able to be featured to speak along with them, ordinary man like me. And because I was the award winner for the BSS group there.
That's
So yeah, they support a lot about Jainism. They may have a lot of literature for you.
They have also done quite a bit of work. I don't know about the chronology that I'm not aware of, but they have done a lot of work on ancient sages and rishi saints of India, etc. The rishi scientists of
Yes.
India, things like that.
There may even be PhD thesis in Kannada. If you go back to the Bangalore University, Karnataka University, and what's called Mangalore University, they have similar
Yeah.
names there. Maybe just changed. They should be PhD scholars. There should be professors there. It is celebrated in Karnataka, like historical from a
So yeah.
literature perspective as well.
Talking about PhD, so in the Adi Shankaracharya chapter, I mentioned so somebody had done a PhD on Adi Shankaracharya's date in from Pune University in 1960, Bombay or Pune, fail to recall exactly.
Yeah.
And so that PhD thesis is referenced in my book, and that
Very
also
nice.
is towards the affirming the 500 BC date of
Yeah.
Shankaracharya ji.
And hopefully I'll be able to search you on LinkedIn and we'll communicate and add whatever value I
I
can.
definitely look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll take the last question of the day, if anyone has. All right. Thank you, Anilji, for sharing your research. The correct dating of India's ancient history and promptly answering all the questions. We are looking forward to read your book. I thank all the participants for attending this event. Recording will be available on our YouTube channel. You can register for future events on our website, indicforum.org. See you all in the next one. Namaste.
Thank you, Siddesh ji, Neha ji, and the entire Indic Forum and all the audience, all the participants who joined. I appreciate your time and this opportunity to present my work and spread, try to correct our history. I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Anilji, and thank you all. Namaste.
Namaste.